We drove away, and my business partner looked at me and he was like, how are we gonna pay for this? So we bought some really incredible cars with Curated, but some do get away. There's a story of a car that I've had a interesting relationship with. We've essentially bought it twice. Never actually paid for the car, but we've chased this car since Curated started for about 5-6 years ago. Maybe we'll end up with it one day. I don't know. The story starts like this. I get a call from a gentleman, and he tells me about a green factory Lamborghini Periscopo, which is one of the early 1974, 1975 Countaches, the very clean cars with no flares. And this is not just any Periscopo, but it's the only car that was ever produced in green over tobacco, which would have matched the factory prototype car, which is the famous car sitting in the museum and that was used for photos in green with tobacco. And it would essentially be, outside of that car at the factory, potentially one of the coolest Countaches on the face of the earth today. Expensive, but very cool. He told me that the owner wanted close to $1 million, and I didn't actually feel that that was that bad considering the mileage. He told me it was 5,000 original miles. And then he told me one thing, that the car was currently painted black, and it had flares and a wing, and was modified to look like a later car. As you could see, that sounds like quite the project, even for an organization that likes some projects and takes on these big jobs. Modifying the body of an aluminum Countach is a lot of work, and especially depending upon how the flares were put on and all these different factors. So I asked him, I said, you know what, I'm still interested. I don't think it's worth $1 million the way it sits, but I'd love to go see the car. Ironically, the car was in our backyard. It was actually in northern Florida. It had been imported, I think in like 78, 79, by the same owner that still had it today. And I said, hey, let's go. I left the next morning, jumped in the car. I went with my business partner and our girlfriends at the time, and we drove up and we said, hey, we're gonna make a trip out of it. On the way, we'll stop at Disney or something like that, and we'll see what this Countach is. Now, the weird part about it was the gentleman that told me about the car said he had no photos and wouldn't release photos. And I says, okay, well, I'll take photos once I get there. So about 5-6 hours into the drive, we finally arrive at this gentleman's home, which is a cute little house in a nondescript neighborhood in northern Florida. But like, I didn't see like a big garage or anything. I saw like a nice little house and just a small little dingy garage. So we meet this man, and he's actually very standoffish at first, a little rude, sort of mean, and asks us, like, what are we going to do with it? Why do we want it? And asks us all these, like, very direct questions. I don't want to call myself a people person, but I'm trying to consider myself pretty good with people. And I can sort of blend in with all different ethnicities, ages, etc. I couldn't break this guy. I mean, this guy was tough. I don't think he even liked me. To start. And it was almost like everything I said, he didn't appreciate it or didn't want to hear it. So fine, just want to see the car. That's all I want to do, take some photos. So we walk in through his yard and we end up in his garage. And there, under a cover, on sort of like these jacks, sits this silhouette of a Countach. So he slowly rolls the cover back, and there she is. It's what looks like a 5000S black with tobacco interior Countach with a periscope roof, which is the iconic roof that's cut into the roof of the Countach. And yeah, it's a cool car. So I start inspecting it, but I realized that the car's been pretty modified. I mean, imagine he put on the front spoiler, he put on the different wheels, even the interior he had modified so it would look like a later car. Now, I get it, in the 80s, the cars didn't really have much value then, so you wanted the newest, latest, greatest thing. What was interesting about the car, though, was that the car was actually modified by Bob Wallace, very famous Lamborghini engineer and test driver. Now, if the car wasn't worth so much as a Periscope original, very cool history that Bob Wallace modified it. But the way it sat, my honest opinion was that it was worth between $600,000 and $700,000. As I'm inspecting the car, I look underneath and you can see all the green paint and the original panels, and you can start to see really how cool this car must have been originally and how cool the car could be one day. We start negotiating, and I'm about to start taking photos to document everything. And the old man freaks out. No photos. I don't trust the internet. I don't know about that Facebook, that thing, this, that, and is anti any photos. So I try to explain to him that, listen, I want to try to remember all the details I can, and I want to try to verify what the car is, but the only way I can do that is with photos. And he was still adamant that he wanted no one to see the car the way it was today. I think partially he felt embarrassed that he had modified the car. And really, I sort of understood that, but I was still a little upset I couldn't take photos. So we negotiated back and forth. And this was actually, again, in the beginning of Curated. This was probably right around the Mura story, if I'm not mistaken. So we already had a lot of money out with that car. We had just sold an SC30. We had just sold a few cars. And we ended up agreeing to a price right around $800,000, which was a lot of money. But my gut told me that restored back to original, the car could be worth a lot more. I mean, some Periscope cars is sold as auction for 1.2, 1.3, as much as $1.8 million. Unfortunately, it could be a year process, 2-year process, and 100,000, 200,000, maybe 300,000 to restore this car back to original. I'm a passionate guy. I fell in love with the story. I think it was that day we gave him a $5,000 deposit. I was that excited about the car. We drove away, and my business partner looked at me and he was like, "How are we gonna pay for this?" And I was like, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out. Don't worry, we'll sell some cars." A couple weeks went by, and I spoke to the old man, and at this point we had built a better rapport. He started to like me, and he had my $5,000, and he knew we were serious. He had seen our website, and we told him about some stuff, and he started asking me, "So when do you want to pay for the car?" I was like, "Well, I think I need another month." And it's funny because looking back now, we pay for a car in 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. When we were first starting, sometimes we would take a month. So I said, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." And another week went by, and finally almost 2 months went by. And at that point, we weren't in the place or financially or almost, physically to buy another big project like that. So one day he called me and he's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, how about we just leave the deposit and I'll figure it out." A couple months went by and I called him one day and he's like, "Well, I kept your deposit and I'm going to sell the car to somebody else." So I was really upset and I was sad. I was like, man, I lost the car. I lost $5,000, which again, at the time was a lot. My business partner was not too happy about that. And time went on and years went by. And fast forward to a couple years ago, while I was actually in Italy at the Lamborghini factory, and I get a call from someone that says there's a Lamborghini Periscopo Countach, black with flares and a wing, that used to be green in England. So I call the dealership and, "Where did you get the car?" So, from Florida. I was like, "Oh my God, that's the car. I know the car." So right away, and this is now 4 or 5 years into Curated, and I wasn't letting this time passion guide me so much. I told him, I said, "Listen, I want the car. I think we're ready now for this project. Send us a contract. We can send you a deposit. The only thing I ask is I want someone from Lamborghini to come inspect the car, and maybe a few other historians to really look at not the details, but what it would take to bring it back to original." So the dealership agreed. Usually you would expect that the dealership in England would be asking way more, and ironically, it was only like 5 or 10 grand more than we were going to pay. As time went on, they probably negotiated him down better than I even could at the time. So it ended up being almost the same deal, but not the right deal. A few days went by and I started asking the guys at Lamborghini, "How soon can we send somebody out?" They said, "I think we'll need 2 weeks." And I felt it. This time we were finally gonna buy the Verde Countach. I started looking up historical photos of the car. I found historical in my eyes, we were gonna buy the car. Fast forward another couple of days, the dealership calls me and they says, "Well, unless you can have someone here inspect it in the next few days, we're gonna have to back out of our agreement. We have another offer." Sometimes you have to listen to the universe. And I sort of realized at that moment that that car was not for me. It was not for us. It wasn't meant to be. I couldn't get someone there in time to really understand what we were going to have to do to restore the car. And unfortunately, that car is one that got away. You never know. One day we might buy it again. It might come across our desk again. We might end up with it, but it's definitely one of the cars that's gotten away.
This month's car stories are sponsored by The Ridge. The Ridge makes a line of wallets and bags that are designed to be minimalist and help us just take with us the things we actually need. So check out the link in the description below for a discount and buy one for yourself, or they make great Christmas presents. And be sure to let them know how thankful you are for their support of VINwiki.